Elliot Hargrove could feel his heart racing as the door to his son's nursery creaked open. The silence hit him first, an oppressive, heavy silence. He stepped inside, his eyes instinctively landing on the crib, where Jameson, his 9-month-old son, lay motionless. No response, no cooing, no babbling, just silence. He knew it was coming, this moment, but it still hurt like a gut punch. The doctors had told him to accept it. They'd been blunt. "Your son's condition is irreversible." The words echoed in his head. Blind, neurologically impaired, likely never to speak or interact. His grip tightened on the doorframe as his mind spun. How could this be his reality? "Hey, buddy," Elliot whispered, forcing a smile. "It's just you and me, huh?" His voice cracked on the last word, and for a brief moment, he almost convinced himself that it was okay, that everything would be fine. But deep down, he knew the truth. There were no miracles, no magic, no happy endings. His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him out of his reverie. It was another message from his wife, Sophie. He had hoped for some response, some sign that she was still thinking of their son, still willing to fight with him. But there was nothing. The message was short. "I can't do this anymore." Another one. "I'm sorry." He sank down into the chair beside the crib. Sophie had left. She couldn't bear to watch their son's decline, and maybe she was right. Maybe she'd made the right choice. After all, Elliot had failed. A voice in his mind whispered that he could fix this, that he could turn things around. But another quieter voice told him to give up, to stop, to let go. He closed his eyes as if, by shutting them, he could erase the pain. But that never worked. The pain was always there, gnawing at him like a constant presence. He ran a hand through his hair, a futile attempt to regain control. Control. It had been his anchor for so long. In his career, in his life, everything had been about having control. He was a billionaire, an innovator, a man of action. Yet here, in the quiet nursery, he was powerless. His son's future, once so full of promise, was now a shadow, and there was nothing he could do to fix it. The beep of a text message brought him back to the present. He stared at the screen, fingers frozen. It was from his assistant. "The new research on neuroplasticity might offer some hope. There's a specialist in town, Dr. Grant." Elliot had heard of neuroplasticity, the idea that the brain could change, adapt, even heal itself in some cases. But it felt like a faint glimmer in the darkness. Could this really help? Could it possibly do anything for Jameson? Or was this just another false hope, like every other medical theory he'd tried? He looked back at his son, the little boy whose once bright future had dimmed. What if this was the answer? Before he could decide, the door creaked again. This time it wasn't just the wind or the house settling. It was Maria, the maid. She entered quietly, as she always did, her daughter Clara in tow. She wasn't supposed to be in the nursery. She wasn't supposed to be anywhere near this sacred space where Elliot's private grief unfolded. But there they were, Clara, the little girl, bouncing in with a giant stuffed elephant clutched to her chest. "Clara, what are you doing here?" Elliot asked, his voice more sharp than he intended. But Clara wasn't fazed. She didn't understand the weight of the moment. She just looked at him with wide eyes and smiled. "Mommy said I could play with Jameson," she said, her small voice an innocent beacon in the room's heavy silence. Elliot frowned. "Jameson he's not playing right now." But Clara ignored him. She toddled over to the crib, completely undeterred, and leaned in, whispering something to the still child.
"Look who it is! It's the elephant! He wants to say hello to you!"
Elliot stood frozen, unsure of how to respond. Was he angry? Was he sad? Clara took her little elephant and held it up to Jameson's face. She made a little clapping noise with her hands, a rhythmic sound that bounced off the walls of the nursery. "Hi, Jameson," she said, full of cheer. "I brought you an elephant." Elliot couldn't stop staring at her. The sound of her tiny hands clapping in the stillness was strangely comforting. It was pure. She wasn't asking for a response. She wasn't expecting anything. She just wanted to bring joy into the room. Her joy was simple, unfiltered, and without expectation. Elliot opened his mouth to say something, but the words wouldn't come. He watched as Clara smiled and rocked the elephant gently. And then something happened, something he hadn't seen in months. Jameson moved. His head turned just slightly in Clara's direction, and his lips parted. A small, quiet giggle escaped him. It was barely noticeable, but it was there. It was real. His son had responded. Elliot's breath caught in his throat. His knees nearly buckled beneath him. Was it possible? Had his son really laughed? It wasn't much, but it was a breakthrough, a moment of light in an otherwise dark world. Before he could process the moment fully, Clara's face lit up with a broad, innocent smile. He laughed. "Did you see that, Mr. Elliot?" He laughed. Elliot didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He looked at Clara and then at his son. For the first time in a long while, hope flickered inside him. Could this be it? Could this tiny spark of life in his son mean that everything wasn't lost? If you're enjoying the journey so far, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment down below with your thoughts on Jameson's breakthrough. What do you think this moment means for the future of his recovery? Elliot stood there, frozen, as Clara giggled again. She continued to clap her hands, her small body bouncing with joy. He laughed again. "Did you see that, Mr. Elliot?" She looked up at him, her big eyes full of innocent wonder. It was as if the walls around him were slowly coming down, piece by piece. Elliot was speechless. He couldn't take his eyes off Jameson, his son's faint smile, the small movement of his head, the laughter. It was like a light shining through a crack in the darkness. Had Clara really done this? Had her innocent, joyful touch been the key to unlocking something that medical science had failed to touch? The room felt different now. It wasn't just a sterile space anymore. It was a place where something could happen, where hope could grow, even in the smallest ways. It was almost impossible to believe. But there it was. Jameson had responded. Jameson had laughed. Elliot's throat tightened. His heart ached as he looked down at his son, still lying in the crib, but now a little more alive. A flicker, a spark. He couldn't help but reach out for the railing of the crib, his fingers brushing against the cool wood. What did this mean? "Clara," he finally said, his voice softer now, almost fragile. "Thank you. You did something." Clara just beamed up at him, clearly proud of herself. "You're welcome. Jameson is my friend now." Elliot felt a pang of something. He hadn't thought about it that way. Clara didn't see Jameson as a problem or a challenge or a broken child. She just saw him. She saw him the way a child would see another child, a friend, someone to play with, someone to care about. No expectations, no fear, just connection. Suddenly he knew he had to do something. This moment, this small miracle, couldn't just be a fluke. There had to be a way to nurture it, to keep this light from flickering out. He felt a shift in himself, an undeniable urge to fight for his son, not just because he had to, but because he wanted to. He wanted to believe in the possibility. As if on cue, his phone buzzed again. It was a text from his assistant. "Dr. Grant's office can see you this afternoon," confirming the appointment. Dr. Grant. Elliot had heard about him. A neurologist who was known for his unconventional methods. His focus on neuroplasticity had piqued Elliot's interest, though it felt like a last-ditch effort at this point. But maybe, just maybe, there was something in this. He looked at Clara, who was now gently rocking her stuffed elephant back and forth near Jameson's face. He looked at Maria, standing in the corner, quietly observing the scene. Maria, the ever-cautious, emotionally distant maid. She hadn't shown much emotion up until now, but even she seemed to soften in the presence of Clara's infectious energy. "Maria," Elliot said, turning toward her, "I think we need to make some changes. This moment with Jameson, it means something. I can feel it. We need to be more hands-on with him. I'm going to see Dr. Grant. I think this neuroplasticity thing might work. I want you to help me too. I need everyone's help." Maria nodded slowly, clearly still processing the sudden shift in Elliot's attitude. "If you think it's what's best, I'll support you." It wasn't a resounding endorsement, but it was enough. That was the start. Elliot felt a sense of determination surge within him. He wasn't going to give up. If there was even the smallest chance that his son could have a better life, he would fight for it. He would do whatever it took. For Jameson, for his family, for hope. Later that afternoon, Elliot found himself sitting across from Dr. Malcolm Grant, the neurologist who specialized in neuroplasticity. The doctor's office was warm and welcoming, filled with bookshelves and soft lighting, nothing like the sterile, cold clinics Elliot had visited before. Dr. Grant was in his mid-40s with a calm, steady presence that put Elliot at ease despite himself. "Mr. Hargrove," Dr. Grant said, his tone gentle but direct, "I've reviewed your son's case and I understand your concerns, but I want to be clear. Neuroplasticity is not a magic cure. What it offers is a different perspective, one that focuses on stimulating the brain's natural ability to adapt, to reorganize itself. It's about creating new pathways, and while it's not guaranteed, we've seen remarkable improvements in cases that seemed hopeless." Elliot sat forward, his eyes locked on Dr. Grant. "So you're saying there's still a chance for Jameson, that he could get better?" Dr. Grant nodded slowly. "It's not an instant fix, but yes, the brain has an extraordinary capacity for change, especially in young children. With the right kind of stimulation, touch, sound, movement, even simple interaction, we can begin to tap into that potential." Elliot felt a glimmer of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. But he had learned to be cautious with hope, to guard it against disappointment. He wasn't ready to get his hopes up too high just yet. Still, something in Dr. Grant's voice made him believe. "I'll give it a try," Elliot said. "Whatever it takes." Dr. Grant smiled. "Good. I think you'll find that the journey ahead is going to be a lot of work, but also incredibly rewarding." As the meeting ended, Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that his life was on the verge of changing. Could this really be the turning point? That night, as he sat in the nursery, staring down at Jameson's sleeping face, he couldn't stop thinking about what Dr. Grant had said. Could Jameson really improve? Could he find a way back from the brink of darkness? He was going to do everything in his power to find out. If you're following Jameson's story and are feeling the hope building, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us bring you more of this journey. The days that followed felt like a blur to Elliot. It was as though the world had moved in a haze of uncertainty and possibility. Every day he would return to the nursery, hoping to see more of the spark that Clara had ignited in his son. He tried to keep his expectations low, knowing how quickly hope could shatter. But he couldn't help it. Every time he saw Jameson, he saw that faint smile, that small movement, and it made him believe, even if just a little. Dr. Grant's advice was clear. Touch, sound, movement, interaction. These were the building blocks. Every day, Elliot tried to engage with Jameson more. He read to him, softly, hoping the sound of his voice would do something, anything, to spark a connection. He sang lullabies, even though he didn't know if his son could hear. and sometimes he just held him, feeling the weight of his small body in his arms, hoping that the simple act of touch would awaken something deep inside. Maria was skeptical at first, but as she watched Elliot's efforts, she too began to change. She helped him set up the nursery in new ways, adding more sensory elements to it. Soft fabrics, colorful toys, musical instruments, and even a small water fountain that created gentle sounds. It was all part of the plan to stimulate Jameson's senses, to break through the silence and give him something to respond to. It wasn't easy. Some days felt like nothing was working. Other days Jameson would respond, just a tiny movement of his hand, a slight shift of his eyes, but it was enough to keep them going. It was progress. Then, one afternoon, after weeks of gentle effort, something incredible happened. Elliot had just finished singing a soft lullaby, his voice barely above a whisper. He leaned over to place a soft kiss on Jameson's forehead when he felt it. Jameson moved. It was small but unmistakable, a twitch. Elliot froze. Had he imagined it? Was this another false hope, a fleeting moment that would vanish just as quickly? "No way," he whispered, his voice thick with disbelief. But there it was again, a twitch of his son's hand, as if reaching for something. A small gesture, but to Elliot it was the world. Jameson had moved on his own. Elliot couldn't contain the wave of emotion that crashed over him. He had been so caught up in the day-to-day struggles that he had forgotten what it felt like to have hope. This was real. This was more than just a fluke. He quickly grabbed his phone and texted Dr. Grant, excitement rushing through his fingertips. "Jameson just moved on his own. I think this is it. We're making progress." He stared down at his son, the room around him blurring in his excitement. Could this really be happening? After everything, after all the despair, was this the turning point? Maria entered the room just then, and her eyes widened when she saw the look on Elliot's face. "What's happened?" she asked softly. "He moved," Elliot said breathlessly. "Jameson moved on his own. He's responding. It's happening." Maria smiled, a genuine, soft smile that reached her eyes. It was the first time in a long while that she looked more than just professional. She looked like a mother, a part of this family. "That's amazing, Elliot," she said. "It's really happening." Elliot's heart swelled with gratitude. This moment was bigger than just a medical breakthrough. It was the beginning of something profound, a change in him, in Maria, in everyone who had been around Jameson's journey. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The next few weeks were filled with small but significant breakthroughs. Every day they tried new methods, more tactile toys, different sounds, and even more time spent interacting with Jameson. He began to make more intentional movements, his eyes tracking sounds, his hands reaching out for objects, even if just for a moment. But the real change came one morning when Elliot was playing with him in the nursery. He was using a soft toy, a little bunny, and moving it slowly in front of Jameson's face, hoping to get a reaction. And then it happened. Jameson turned his head. He turned to face the bunny, and then he laughed. It wasn't a full laugh, not yet, but it was real. It was the sound Elliot had been longing to hear for months. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't just a random movement. Jameson was responding. He was laughing. Elliot's throat tightened, and he had to take a step back to steady himself. He couldn't believe it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. "Maria," he called out, his voice shaking with emotion. "Maria, come here. You have to see this." Maria rushed into the room, her eyes widening when she saw what was happening. Is he laughing?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Elliot said, choking on the words. "Yes, he is." The two of them stood there for a moment, watching in awe as Jameson continued to smile, his little giggle filling the room. It was a sound they had longed for, a sound that filled the space with warmth, with life. And in that moment, Elliot knew something fundamental had shifted. Jameson wasn't just a child to be cared for. He was a child to be nurtured, to be loved, to be brought back to life. If you're enjoying Jameson's journey and the breakthrough moments, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below to share your thoughts. Every comment helps us bring you more of this emotional ride. Stay tuned for the next chapter. The days after Jameson's laugh felt like a surreal dream, one where everything they'd been hoping for was finally coming true. Elliot spent hours with his son, each day growing more confident, more eager to continue the progress they'd made. Every time Jameson reacted, no matter how small the response, Elliot was there to witness it, to treasure it, and to nurture it. Maria, too, had become more involved. At first, she had kept her distance, unsure of how to handle the intense emotional roller coaster. But after seeing Jameson's progress, she had let down her walls. She would sit with him in the morning, speaking softly and gently moving his hands or encouraging him to reach for toys. There was a tenderness in her that Elliot had never seen before, and it was the same tenderness that seemed to be bringing his son back to life. The breakthrough with the laugh wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Jameson began reaching for objects more often, sometimes swiping his hand in the direction of a toy or a sound. Elliot and Maria continued to try new techniques incorporating more touch, sound, and movement, with each day revealing something new. One afternoon, as Elliot was sitting with Jameson, a new sound echoed through the room. It was small, barely perceptible, but it was unmistakable. A word. Dada? The single word hung in the air like a dream. Elliot froze, his heart nearly stopped. He had heard it clearly. His son had just said his name. Did he? Maria's voice trailed off as she looked at him in disbelief. Elliot couldn't speak at first. He just stared at Jameson, his eyes welling up with tears. Dada. He had said Dada. I think he did, he managed to say, his voice cracking. Maria, her face bright with wonder, sat next to Jameson, speaking gently. Dada? She repeated softly, as though coaxing him to say it again. Elliot couldn't help himself. He leaned forward, his hands shaking as he reached for his son. Jameson, can you say it again? Dada, please. And to his amazement, Jameson did it again, a small, soft sound, but a word. His heart swelled in his chest. His son was speaking. In that moment, Elliot felt as if the universe had opened up in front of him. All the long nights, all the painful moments of doubt had led to this. He had never believed it was possible. Never truly believed his son could talk. But now, with one word, everything had changed. Maria and Elliot shared a silent look, a look that spoke volumes. It wasn't just progress anymore, it was a miracle. I can't believe it, Maria said, shaking her head. I never thought we'd get here. I didn't think he would ever speak. Elliot could hardly contain the flood of emotions crashing over him. He reached out to gently hold Jameson, pulling him close. You're amazing, little man, he whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. I knew you had it in you. In the following days, Jameson began to show even more signs of improvement. His eye contact became stronger, more focused. He turned his head toward sounds with greater purpose. His small vocalizations turned into longer sounds. The progression was gradual, but it was real. As they continued to work with Jameson, Dr. Grant's methods were proving to be the catalyst they had desperately needed. His focus on neuroplasticity, stimulating the brain with touch, sound, and emotion, was slowly unlocking the pathways that had been blocked for so long. Elliot had never been more determined to see this through, to give his son the best chance he could. But as the days went on, Elliot found himself battling not just his hope, but also his fears. What if the progress stalled? What if this was all they would get? He had watched other parents, other families go through the same struggles, and he had seen them lose hope. when the progress they had worked so hard for began to plateau. His mind wandered to that dark place again. What if we're just fooling ourselves? One evening, as Elliot sat in the nursery watching Jameson, his thoughts turned inward. Maybe I'm just holding on to something impossible. Maybe I've spent too much time praying for something that can't happen. As if on cue, Jameson let out a soft giggle, almost a laugh, but quieter. It was small, but it was unmistakable. His eyes met his father's, and for the first time in weeks, Elliot smiled without fear. "Look at you," he whispered, reaching out to gently tickle his son's stomach. "You've come so far." Just then, Maria entered the room, and she saw the smile on Elliot's face. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice light. "I think he's starting to get it," Elliot replied, his voice full of wonder. "He's understanding me. He's laughing. I think he's really starting to recognize who I am." Maria's face softened. "I think you're right." But Elliot couldn't shake the nagging feeling at the back of his mind. What if this was just another moment of fleeting hope? If you're feeling the tension and hope building in Jameson's journey, be sure to like and subscribe to continue following this incredible transformation. And don't forget to leave a comment below. Your support and feedback mean everything as we continue on this emotional ride. As the days turned into weeks, the feeling of cautious optimism began to grow stronger within Elliot. Jameson was showing more and more signs of improvement. It wasn't just the speech, though that alone had been enough to ignite a fire within him. It was the small things, too, the way his son's eyes would follow him around the room now, the way his tiny hand would curl around his fingers when Elliot held it, the way he would smile when he heard his voice. Elliot couldn't stop watching him. Every day felt like a small victory, and every victory made the next one feel more possible. But beneath his growing sense of hope, there was still a nagging fear. What if it all stopped? What if Jameson plateaued? What if it wasn't enough? Even with all the progress, Elliot couldn't fully let go of that fear. It lingered in the back of his mind, a shadow that followed him even on the brightest of days. One afternoon, as he sat by the window watching the sun begin to set, his phone buzzed. He picked it up, his heart beating a little faster. It was a message from Dr. Grant. "I'd like to schedule a checkup for Jameson. We're making good progress, but I want to see how he's doing with some more intensive stimulation. The next few months will be crucial." Elliot stared at the message for a moment, his thumb hovering over the screen. The words made his heart race. Next few months will be crucial. Was this the make or break point? Would Jameson's progress plateau soon, or was there more ahead of them? The thought of pushing forward and possibly facing another setback was terrifying, but he also knew that he couldn't stop now, not when they had come this far. He quickly typed a response, confirming the appointment with Dr. Grant for the following week. Later that night, as he sat in the nursery holding Jameson in his arms, he tried not to let the fear show on his face. Maria was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she prepared dinner, and for the first time in months, Elliot felt a sense of peace settle over him. It wasn't perfect, not yet, but it was a far cry from the despair that had once consumed him. Jameson shifted in his arms, and Elliot looked down at him, his breath catching in his throat. "You've come so far, little one," he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. "I don't know what the future holds, but I promise you, we'll get through this together." Just as he spoke the words, Jameson made a soft sound, a soft cooing noise like a small laugh. It was like a miracle, a sign that everything they were doing was having an effect. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make Elliot's heart soar. Maria appeared in the doorway, a smile on her face, as she watched the exchange between father and son. "I think he's trying to talk," she said softly, a note of wonder in her voice. Elliot laughed, his throat tight with emotion. "I think so too." But even as he smiled, the fear was there. lurking just beneath the surface. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. They had only just scratched the surface of what Jameson was capable of. The next few months would be critical, and Elliot would do whatever it took to help his son, to give him every possible chance at a future. That night, as Elliot lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind raced. He thought about all the specialists who had told him to accept it. He thought about the hours spent in silence, the moments of heartbreak when his son showed no sign of life. And he thought about Clara, the little girl who had given them hope, who had sparked that first smile from Jameson with nothing more than the pure joy of a child. Clara, her innocence had been the catalyst for everything. It was her laughter, her unfiltered love, that had broken through Jameson's isolation. And it was that same love that had given Elliot the courage to fight, to believe. He had to find a way to thank her, to show her just how much her presence had meant to their family. She had given them more than hope. She had given them the courage to keep going. The next morning, Elliot called Maria into the nursery. "I need to talk to you about something," he said, his voice steady but urgent. Maria raised an eyebrow but nodded. "What's going on?" "I want to send Clara to school. I think it's important. She's been so pivotal in Jameson's progress, and I want to make sure she gets the education she deserves. I can't let her grow up without the opportunities she needs." Maria's eyes softened, and she smiled at him. "You've thought about this a lot, haven't you?" "I have," Elliot replied, his voice firm. "She's made a difference in our lives, more than she could ever know. I want to make sure she has everything she needs to thrive. I want her to know that she's a part of this family." Maria nodded, a tear glistening in her eye. "I'll make sure she knows. You're doing something good for her, Elliot, something very good." Elliot smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was doing the right thing. If you're feeling the growth and hope in Jameson's story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more updates on this incredible journey. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. How do you think the next few months will unfold? Your feedback fuels the story ahead. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Elliot found himself juggling the intensive daily routines with Jameson, the appointments with Dr. Grant, and the growing sense of urgency that came with every new breakthrough. It felt like every moment was critical, as though the next word, the next laugh, the next movement could be the one that unlocked everything. But it wasn't just about the progress. It was about the possibilities. Clara had started attending school as promised. Her mother, Maria, had been deeply touched by the gesture. It was a small thing, but it was a powerful one. Clara was a bright, curious child, and now she had the chance to explore her world in a way she hadn't before. Every time Elliot saw her running around the yard, her laughter echoing in the air, he felt a swell of pride. She had brought so much light into their lives, and now she had a chance to grow, to thrive. But even as Clara flourished, Jameson's progress continued to surprise Elliot. Every day something new happened. He was turning toward sounds with more precision, his small hands reaching out for toys. He would laugh more often, the sound becoming less of a rarity and more of a constant presence in the nursery. And the words, they kept coming. "Dada," he whispered again one morning, a soft, breathy sound that was almost like a prayer. Elliot's heart skipped a beat. He looked down at his son, astonished. Was this real? Was he really speaking? "Dada," he repeated, his voice full of wonder. This time Jameson's little face lit up with a smile, and he let out another giggle, this one louder, more definite. He was laughing. He was engaging. Elliot quickly pulled out his phone and texted Maria, his hands shaking with excitement. He did it again. He said, "Dada." As soon as Maria arrived, they sat together in the nursery, watching Jameson. It felt like everything had led up to this moment, this tiny victory. What had started as nothing but silent despair was now a blossoming life, full of sound, full of laughter, full of possibility. But as Elliot basked in the joy of this breakthrough, a new thought crept into his mind. What if this was just the beginning? What if there was more to come? He had seen the power of neuroplasticity at work. Dr. Grant had been right. The brain was capable of change. It was capable of healing. And now that they had a taste of that healing, Elliot couldn't help but wonder what Jameson's future would look like. One day, while sitting in the living room with Maria, Elliot found himself talking about it. What if he talks more? What if he can walk? What if we can teach him everything we thought he couldn't do? Maria looked at him with a soft smile, her eyes full of understanding. You've come a long way, Elliot. We've all come a long way, but you have to remember it's not just about what we can make him do. It's about the love we give him, the patience, the time. That's what's going to shape his future. You don't have to know everything right now. Elliot nodded, feeling the weight of her words. She was right, of course. He had spent so long focusing on the what-ifs that he had forgotten to just be in the moment. He was so obsessed with the future that he had stopped appreciating the progress happening right in front of him. That night, after Maria had gone to bed, Elliot found himself standing in the nursery, watching Jameson sleep, his tiny chest rising and falling with each breath, his face soft and peaceful. He couldn't stop thinking about how far they had come. It had been months, but it felt like a lifetime of trying, failing, and trying again. And now, finally, they had something to hold on to. He stepped closer to the crib and whispered softly, "You're doing it, little one. You're really doing it." And for the first time in a long while, Elliot felt at peace. The next morning, Dr. Grant came by for the scheduled checkup. Elliot was eager to see what the specialist thought of Jameson's progress. He had seen the changes for himself, but he needed Dr. Grant's expertise to truly understand what was happening. Dr. Grant walked into the nursery with a warm smile, his eyes immediately locking onto Jameson. "I've been following your progress," he said, shaking Elliot's hand, "and I have to say this is remarkable. What we're seeing here is the power of neuroplasticity in action. Jameson is adapting, and he's adapting fast." Elliot felt a surge of relief at the words. "So it's real? It's not just a fluke?" "No, not at all," Dr. Grant replied. "What we're seeing is exactly what we expect. The brain is starting to rewire itself. Every small movement, every sound, every laugh, it's a sign that the connections are being made." Elliot exhaled, the weight of the world lifting off his shoulders. "How far can we take this? What's next?" Dr. Grant paused, considering the question. "The next step is to continue stimulating his brain in new ways. We'll increase the intensity of his interactions, his movements, and his exposure to sound and touch. The goal is to keep pushing his boundaries, but in a way that feels natural. The key is consistency." Elliot nodded, his mind racing. Consistency, that was what it would take. They had already come so far, but there was more to do. There was still so much to explore. As the weeks went by, Elliot found himself in a new rhythm. The days were filled with routine, interacting with Jameson, trying new methods of stimulation, and maintaining a balance between hope and caution. But there was no longer a feeling of despair. Now there was only possibility. Clara continued to grow and thrive in school, and Maria continued to be a steady presence in their home. But it was Jameson who remained the center of it all. His laugh, his smile, his small but meaningful movements, these were the things that kept them all going. And then, one evening, as they sat together in the nursery, something happened that they hadn't expected. Jameson turned his head toward the window, his eyes wide and focused. and for the first time, he said something that took their breath away. "Mama." Maria gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Elliot, too, was speechless. Jameson had said, "Mama." It wasn't just a sound, a random noise. It was a word, a real word. Elliot and Maria exchanged a look of pure wonder. This was it. This was what they had been waiting for. Jameson had found his voice, and the world had just gotten a little brighter. If you're feeling the progress in Jameson's incredible journey, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your predictions for what comes next in his recovery. The days following Jameson's first real word, "Mama," felt like a dream come true. Elliot could hardly believe it, even as he replayed the moment over and over in his mind. His son had said something, and it was something that connected him to the world in a way they hadn't even dreamed possible. The word "Mama" wasn't just a word, it was a bridge. It was proof that Jameson wasn't just existing in silence, he was reaching out. Maria had been overwhelmed with joy, tears streaming down her face as she held Jameson close. The atmosphere in the house had shifted again. Hope had turned from a faint, flickering light into something tangible, something they could touch, something they could see growing every day. It was a strange feeling, hope. Elliot had spent so much of his life working in the world of data, logic, and certainty, but this was different. There was no formula for it, no chart, no guaranteed outcome. What had happened with Jameson was something so pure, so miraculous, that it transcended reason, and yet every day his son kept proving it could be real. Dr. Grant had been thrilled when he heard about Jameson's progress. Every appointment felt like a celebration. His checks on Jameson's brain scans showed signs of neuroplastic growth, the brain's ability to make new neural connections. Jameson was adapting, and not just at a superficial level. He was truly engaging with the world around him. But even as the progress seemed to accelerate, Elliot's mind never fully stopped questioning. The fear of something going wrong was always there, lurking in the background. What if this was the peak? What if Jameson couldn't go any further? He caught himself more than once staring at his son while he slept, wondering if he was being too hopeful, if he was expecting too much. Was he setting himself up for another disappointment? He couldn't shake the nagging doubt. But every time Jameson laughed, every time he looked up and smiled, those doubts seemed to fade, replaced by something stronger, a belief that maybe, just maybe, this was real. Weeks passed, and Jameson continued to make small but significant strides. The Dada and Mama weren't just isolated incidents anymore. They became part of his vocabulary. He would say Dada when Elliot entered the room, his eyes lighting up as though he knew exactly who his father was. He would say Mama when Maria walked into the nursery, a recognition that was both heartwarming and incredible. Each word felt like a milestone. Each syllable was a victory in the battle against silence, against the prognosis that had once defined their lives. Jameson was coming alive, slowly but surely. One evening, as they sat in the nursery together, Maria handed Elliot a small toy, a soft bunny, and encouraged Jameson to grab it. Elliot positioned the toy just within Jameson's reach, holding his breath as he waited for any sign of action. For a few seconds, nothing happened, but then, with a sudden and purposeful movement, Jameson reached out. His hand made contact with the toy, his fingers closing around it. Elliot couldn't breathe. He had done it. Maria gasped softly, and Elliot, unable to contain his excitement, reached over and scooped Jameson up, holding him close. "You did it, buddy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Maria stood beside them, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I never thought I'd see this day, never in a million years." Elliot looked down at his son, his heart swelling with pride. He had done it. Jameson was reaching, laughing, speaking. He was living, truly living. But as the evening wore on, Elliot found himself thinking about something else, the future. They had come so far, but what lay ahead? What would the next few months, the next few years look like for Jameson? Was this the beginning of something even greater, or was this as far as he could go? The unknown felt like a weight, but it also felt like a promise that there was more to this story, more to Jameson's life than they had ever dared to imagine. That night, as he tucked Jameson into his crib, Elliot whispered, "I'll always be here for you. I won't stop fighting for you. You've already shown me that anything is possible." And in that moment, as he watched his son drift off to sleep, he realized something else, something more important than all the medical breakthroughs, all the words and laughter and movement. Love had gotten them this far, and love would carry them forward. Months passed, and the changes in Jameson continued. He began to make more and more progress in his physical abilities. First, it was reaching out for toys, then it was grasping them, and eventually, he started to make small movements with his legs, pushing against the mattress when he was placed on his back. The tiny moments of triumph, each one a small victory, kept building. There was still a long way to go, and Elliot knew that. The road ahead would be hard, but with each step forward, the uncertainty felt less suffocating. They were no longer just surviving, they were living. It wasn't just about Jameson anymore, it was about their whole family, about the people who had come together against all odds to create a life of possibility. Clara, who had sparked the light in Jameson, was now an integral part of their lives in a way that went beyond the nursery. Maria, who had been a caretaker at first, was now a true part of the family, offering wisdom and support in ways Elliot never expected. And of course, there was Elliot himself. He had changed too. He had learned that hope was not a weakness, but a strength. He had learned that love, simple, unconditional love, was the key to all things, and it was love that would guide them into the future. As Jameson took his first steps, wobbly, unsure, but determined, Elliot couldn't help but think back to those dark days, the days when he thought he would never hear his son's laugh or see his eyes light up with recognition. The days when he had accepted the possibility of a future without hope. But now, here they were, and the future, though uncertain, was full of promise. Elliot held out his hands, his heart in his throat, as Jameson took another wobbly step forward. This time, there was no fear, just the belief that the world was wide open, full of possibilities. And for the first time, Elliot knew without a doubt that anything was possible. Thank you so much for following Jameson's incredible journey. If you've been moved by the story, please like and subscribe, and let us know what you think in the comments below. What's your favorite moment in this story? How do you think the family will continue to grow from here? Your thoughts mean so much to us. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching Jameson's journey. If you'd like more stories like this or have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Your feedback helps us create more meaningful content.